Hello and welcome to episode number 16 of Chel Squared. I'm your host, Andrew Chelney, and oh man, do we have a show for you today. Before we get started, please make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Chel Squared. We just broke 100 followers on Twitter, which I'm very happy about, and on Facebook at Chel Squared for more hot takes, news by future guests, poll questions, and a whole lot more. Please rate the show on iTunes if you enjoy listening. It means a lot to me. And every time you like the show on SoundCloud, give it a rating on iTunes or whatever else. A puppy gets a hug from its owner. I don't make the rules, just spreading knowledge here. Hockey's back. Hockey is back. Hockey's back. And I couldn't get enough watching the Sharks last night, watching the Caps blow out the Bruins last night. It was magical. I love it. You love it. We're here because we love hockey, and that was day number 1 was incredible. Night number 2 tonight is going to be even better. Rangers are playing. My Rangers are finally back, and they're absolutely, probably, hopefully going to beat the Predators tonight at home. This week's show is all about the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll talk expectations up in Pittsburgh this season, how solid the blue line is. Spoiler, I don't know if it is. I don't know. I don't know. Talk a little bit about the bottom 6 shuffling for the Penguins this season. We'll get into Jack Johnson's awful contract and awful play as well. Talk about Matt Murray's ability to carry the team to its third cup in 4 years, which I don't know if he can do either, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Discuss the poll question, of course. Talk a little bit about Daniel Sprong, the Penguins prospect, who our guest absolutely adores. We're going to talk about our predictions for tonight's games and a whole lot more. Here with me to talk everything about Pittsburgh Penguins and hockey in general is Penguins writer for the Hockey Writers, Connor McTague. Connor, how's it going?
It's going good. How's it with you?
It's going well. Before we start the show, you went abroad this summer to Sweden, if I'm not mistaken. Talk to me a little bit about that experience and what you did overseas.
Well, I did it as an internship for so I could graduate college. So I went to Sweden. I did my internship with Totally Stockholm. It's like a lifestyle magazine that covers all things Stockholm, and they have a bunch of divisions like Totally Gothenburg. They have stuff for Ireland like Totally Cork, Totally Dublin. And so I was there. I was doing stuff on music. I was doing stuff on concerts. I was doing stuff on just events around the city and everything. I got to do a few articles about things that were happening in the city, and it was a good learning experience for me.
That's awesome. I mean, how was Sweden? Because I would love to go. Sweden, judging by your tweets, was incredible. Was it not?
Oh, it was the best time of my life. I don't think there was a single day there where I wasn't doing something. I was always out with people because there's 11 other interns there, so I was out with them all the time. We were going like to bars. We were walking around the city. We went on trips to other parts of the country, and then I took a few days and went to Finland and Norway, so I got the whole Nordic experience while I was there.
That's incredible. I mean, that sounds absolutely phenomenal. So kind of the Pittsburgh Penguins here. They're still the favorite, obviously one of the biggest favorites to win the cup this season. More questions, I would say, this year as opposed to previous years. The blue line, which is what I want to start with right now. I personally, factually, it's not as good as it was, with the addition of Jack Johnson on top of that as well. According to dailyfaceoff.com, the defensive pairings for tonight's game are Brian Dumoulin and Chris Letang on the top pairing, Oli Mata and Jack Johnson, which is, not a great pairing, Jamie Alexiak and Justin Schultz on the bottom pairing. Jack Johnson got a horrific contract this offseason from the Pittsburgh Penguins. Of course, was a Blue Jacket for a little bit and now is wearing the black and gold in Pittsburgh. Jack Johnson, $3.25 million deal until 2023. That's a 5-year deal. The man is 31 years old. He's not good at what he does. He could be a great person. I don't know. I haven't spoken to him, but Jack Johnson on the ice is not a good hockey player. So with that in mind, You give him this contract, and with the stipulation that he plays hockey. What in your opinion is the blue line looking like for the Penguins? Because you have Mata, who's not as good as he could be because of the concussion issues. You have Jack Johnson now in the mix. You have Alexiak. You have Brian Dumoulin supposedly playing top 2 minutes. Pretty much your best 2 defensemen are Chris Letang, who, as we all know, also has concussion issues, and Justin Schultz. How sturdy is this blue line for Pittsburgh, in your opinion?
I think it honestly all comes down to Letang's performance this year, because he can mask a lot of issues on the blue line like he did in 2015-16 and for the most part of 2016-17 before he went down with his neck injury. So if he comes back, bounces back from his inconsistent year last year, I think he can cover up for the shortcomings that could come from Mata if he just plateaus at where he performed last year, and Johnson if he somehow performs below expectations, even though they're already low to begin with. But I think Dumoulin is a perfectly fine number 2 defenseman, and I think he could even be a number 1 on some teams. So having him with Letang and for his defensive prowess is especially good.
I just feel like my biggest concern is, let's say Chris Letang goes down again, right? Let's say, hopefully that doesn't happen for sure, but let's say it does. Who would step up for Chris Letang? You would have Justin Schultz and Brian Dumoulin, and then what? What would you do in that situation?
Well, I mean, as we saw in 2016-17, Schultz could step in and produce offensively the way Letang did. He had 51 points during the season, but I think you're still missing that dynamic two-way play that you get. I mean, Juuso Riikola, they signed him out of Finland this offseason, and he was great during the preseason, but I don't know if he can carry that over to regular season action if he's forced into a role where he has to play 20 or so minutes a night. So it would be much like 2016-17. They would have to rely on their forwards to pick up a lot of the slack.
As you said, you see Juuso is it Riikola? Not the lozenge brand, I'm assuming, right?
Riikola.
Riikola. Okay, 24 from the Finnish league here. He's from the Finnish league. He's 24 years old. The Penguins signed him to a 1-year entry-level contract. He's not listed as one of the top 6 defensemen, but he could be if in case of injury. Other notable additions, Matt Cullen, of course, returning. 41 years old, this man. Is this man ever gonna stop playing hockey? I wish I had the kind of just drive Matt Cullen does when I'm 41, because that's awesome to be 41 years old, to be that kind of 4th line, 13th forward, and at his age and still continuing to love the sport and love what he does and push the way he does. I mean, that's awesome. I love Matt Cullen. On the ice, I mean, he's obviously slowed down a little bit. As we said, he's 41, but he's still Matt Cullen. So I commend him for continuing to love the game enough to continue playing at 41. That's awesome. Jimmy Hayes, can you talk to me a little bit about why you signed Jimmy Hayes? He's 28 years old. You gave him a 2-way contract, which isn't, it's a low-risk, high-reward potential deal. Only $650,000. 2-way deal for a year. Let's see how he does. He's 28, from New Jersey the last year. I mean, what's his role realistically? Is he just going to be a 13th forward, or what are you going to do with Jimmy Hayes now? He's
starting the year with Wilkes-Barre Scranton, but as we've seen in the past, the Penguins do have a tendency to have the injuries rack up.
Right.
So it wouldn't be surprising to see him get into a few games this season. And if he does get extended time, he'll probably be on the 4th line for most of it, where I think he could be productive because they're not putting him in a situation where he's being forced to produce. And I think taking that pressure off him could help, but I'm not sure that he's going to actually get a huge amount of time this year.
Probably the biggest loss the Penguins have seen from last season is, of course, the Connor Sherry trade, and by extension Matt Hunwick leaving as well. Both went to Buffalo. Connor Sherry, how big of a hole is that in the team? Because I said this before, Connor Sherry is one of those players in my mind that can show you what he can do in a couple of games and then just not show up the next few. Very streaky, very inconsistent, but has flashes of brilliance. Will Pittsburgh miss Connor Sherry this season?
I think they may. Like, they're losing out on a guy who has scored 20 goals before, but I think they were anticipating Aston Reese and Sprong having better camps than they did to fill the hole, because they did have a logjam and they needed that. They needed Sherry's cap hit to be gone for cap space too. So I think if Aston Reese, he starts in the AHL, he has a good start, comes back up, and Sprong, he's going to start on the fourth line. But I think if they both can get back on track and have a strong year, I don't think the loss of Sherry will be as impactful as it may be if they don't step up.
So talk to me a little bit about Dominic Simon, because he's 24 years old. The league hasn't heard a lot about him up until now, but he's making the team. He's playing tonight. What do you see out of Dominic Simon that says he is here and he is here to stay?
Well, Crosby loves him, so that definitely helps his case to stay up. And Crosby has praised him in the past, and he has played with him. And I think in some stretches, Simon shows that he can be a very good player. I'm not sure about any sort of elite type of play, but he can put up 40 points in the right situation. I think being beside Crosby will help him, but he needs to remain more consistent than he was last year. He would have stretches of good play, but then he would make a ton of mental mistakes that would just derail everything that he had going for him.
Dominic Simon, I said Simon a little bit earlier. It's Dominic Simon, draft fifth round. It's been a long day. Fifth round in the 2015 draft by the Penguins. He played a little bit last season. He played around a little less than half the season, 33 games, 4 goals, 12 points in total. Cracked the league, actually, in 2015-2016 with 3 games in Pittsburgh with 1 assist. This is probably the year where Simon has to stay for good at this point. He's 24, so if he gets sent down again, he was almost a point a game player last season in Wilkes-Barre, 17 points in 21 games. But if he doesn't produce in the NHL this season, I mean, would you figure that the Penguins are going to trade him at this point if he doesn't produce? Because he's 24. He still has a couple more years left to show that he can grow into a decent scorer. But if he, let's say he gets those 12 points in 30 some odd games again, and like you said, has flashes and then doesn't show up again, is there a plan for Simon, or are they going to keep him longer, or are they done, do you think, after this season?
Well, he re-signed for 2 years during the offseason, but it's at a minimal cap hit of $750. So I think if he does have the 12 and 33 again, he certainly won't be on the first line. They might use him as a healthy scratch, 13th forward type guy, or maybe he'll play fourth line minutes. But the Penguins aren't short of having any kind of, the Penguins have guys in the minors who could step up and take over a role that he has, like Ryan Haggerty.
Yep.
And Teddy Bluger, even though he's a center, he could slide over to the wing and produce at the rate that Simon has. But the Penguins are definitely hoping that Simon does well this year, and especially because they're going to put him with Crosby.
What about someone like a Derek Brassard, who is supposed to be a dynamic player for the Penguins? I mean, this guy could score on Ottawa. He scored in New York, he scored in Ottawa, and he came to Pittsburgh, scored a little bit, but for the most part, seemingly underperformed. He had 8 points in 14 games, and in the playoffs, didn't perform as well as the Penguins would have liked him to perform. What is the best case scenario for Derek Brassard this season in Pittsburgh?
I think best case for him is he goes back to his career norm of around 50 points a season. Last year, even Sullivan said it himself, he had some trouble adjusting because he was taking on a new role. He's behind 2 generational talents in Pittsburgh, as opposed to where he was the number 1 center in Ottawa and he was a number 2 guy in New York. So I think that having the full offseason to adjust and maybe getting to play second power play time might help him get back on track. And if the Penguins can get 50 points out of their third line center, they're going to be pretty damn hard to stop.
I mean, if you get 50 points out of any third line center, you are looking good. Unless your top 6 isn't scoring and your third line center for whatever reason scoring all your points, then if your third line center is out here scoring 45, 50 points, you're looking pretty solid. You're definitely going far, at least to make the playoffs. I mean, for a third line guy on top of your top six producing like they should, to have a third line guy step up and score 45, 50 points, that's a lot. That would be great. For Derek Brassard, I mean, on the third line, I don't know if he can reach that point total. According to Daily Faceoff, his line mates are going to be Simone and Brian Rust. So obviously that's not going to stay for the entire season or anything. But if, let's say hypothetically it does, then, I mean, I don't know if Brassard can reach 50 playing with Rust and Simone, but if, let's say, Daniel Sprong performs very well, and then he moves up, and then it's Brassard, Simone, and Sprong, and then that'll be a much better line than Brian Rust on that line. But although we've seen in the past, Brian Rust has a shot and a half. He loves just picking corners, and he knows how to do it very well. So you wrote an article about Sidney Crosby and if he can reach 2,000 points, which would be second behind Wayne Gretzky for most points all the time. Is that attainable? Talk to me a little bit about that article and if Sidney Crosby can physically achieve that, because as we know, he has had health problems, health concerns. So taking health into consideration, would he be able to reach 2,000 points realistically?
I think on a talent, if you're just looking purely at talent, he will definitely reach it. But I think because of the injuries, like you've mentioned, he had the concussion issues. I don't think, realistically, if I'm thinking this, probably he won't reach it because it would require him playing at least another 10 years, where he'd be 41 years old at the time. So but he would have to average, like over the remainder of his contract, he'd have to average around 127 points a year, and he's never got that many in a season before. So it would be hard to see him getting there unless he has a couple big more seasons, or if he decides to just stick it out until he gets there. Maybe he pulls a Yager, plays till he's 45, breaks the 2,000 point barrier. But if I'm looking at it purely from realistic standards of him breaking down from injuries or just not having it anymore, because I don't think he's going to play if he can't produce at the level that he expects himself to. So I think he can get pretty close to it, but I don't know if he's going to break it.
1,116 points in 864 games for Sidney Crosby. That's incredible. Also, he missed a lot of time with injury. He missed a chunk he missed half of the 2010-2011 season, missed a ton of the 11-12 season, missed a few games in the 12-13 season. I mean, he's had some problems and still has over 1,100 points at age 31. That is crazy. That's wild to me personally. I mean, is McDavid gonna have that amount of points at age 31? Probably. I would assume so.
I think he will. I think that McDavid will definitely get there before, barring injuries. Like Crosby probably would have reached the 1,000 point mark around age 27 had he not suffered all these injuries. And I hope to God McDavid stays healthy because I want to see him. I want to see him do well. So I'm just hoping that he doesn't get the same fate as Crosby did.
That would be rough for not only him, but for the sport as well. I mean, to have... It's almost like LeBron James or Tom Brady just not playing. It's the same thing. These are the faces of the sport, and to not have them play is not only damages their careers, but also the sport in general, because you're the face of not only your sport, but the team and everything that encapsulates, what you do. You can't show that off because your top guys aren't playing. Leads me into the poll question for tonight's show. By the way, if you want to vote on the poll question, and some responses might make the show, if you tweet at Chel Squared on Twitter, make sure you follow that. Reached over 100 votes. The question is, how do you feel about Pittsburgh's blue line of Dumoulin, Letang, Mana, Schultz, Alexiak, Johnson, and how does that stack up against the rest of the NHL? Now, the four choices were best in the NHL, above average, average, and below average. Before I tell you, Connor, and how many votes which choices got, which one would you vote for? Which in your opinion is the Pittsburgh blue line?
I think they're above average, but a lot of it is on a bunch of hypotheticals, because you have to depend on Letang bouncing back. You have to depend on Mata not going back to what he was a couple of years ago. You have to depend on Schultz rebounding offensively, and you have to depend on Johnson not completely flaming out in year one of his deal. I want to compare them to someone like LA. They have their elite guy. They have a bunch of compliments. I think they might be a bit better than LA, and I think I would put them below Anaheim's defensive core, because I think Lindholm in Anaheim is one of the best defensemen in the league, and I think he's better than Letang defensively, but I don't think he's better than him offensively, which is quite obvious, because Letang is probably one of the three best offensive guys in the league from the blue line.
In terms of the LA comparison, I mean, I don't know, because Drew Doughty is
in a world of his own two ways, but I think that overall they have, like, Muzzin, you could compare Muzzin to Dumoulin if you want to, and then I think Schultz is there. I think Mata is more like, might be a tick below Alec Martinez, but I think he's still in that tier.
Yeah, Jake Muzzin is one of the most, I think, underrated defensemen in the league. Jake Muzzin is so good at what he does, and I wish he got
former Penguins draft pick too.
Well, I mean, you should have kept Penguins should have kept him. Jake Muzzin is very good at what he does. Drew Doughty obviously is one of the best defensemen in the league. They got Dion Phaneuf in the bottom six for what it is. I mean, he's there. Definitely not a top four defenseman, but I mean, I guess in a sheltered role, Dion Phaneuf could potentially be not terrible, I guess. And of course, Oscar Fantenberg and Derek Forbort. I mean, I would probably put LA a notch or two above Pittsburgh, not by much, but enough so that there's a distinction between the two. Just because, let's say Drew Doughty goes down, because if you compare the two teams, right? Let's say Doughty and Letang go down at the same time. Pittsburgh is going to have a tougher time picking up the pieces than LA is, in my opinion. So if you go by that comparison, I would think LA is a little more capable of, not, I don't want to say gliding by, but waiting for Doughty to hypothetically return, but that's kind of what I'm going for. LA, I just feel like, is a little bit more capable of holding down the fort until their star defenseman gets back. I mean, do you agree with that? Do you think I'm crazy? What do you think about that?
Oh, no, I completely agree with you. I think that if the Penguins were to lose Letang again, I think they'd have a tougher time coming back from it. And I think, like, LA, they're going to get consistency from their blue line, and the Penguins are all based on what ifs right now. And of course, Muzzin's better offensively than Dumoulin too. So as we saw during the playoffs a couple of years ago, the Penguins had a hell of a time trying to move the puck up. And I think if LA had that same type of issue, they have guys who are able to move it up though.
The four choices that I gave on Twitter, the best in the NHL, above average, average, and below average, over 100 votes, 6% said best in the NHL. Now, if you voted for that, I need you to tweet me. I need you to email me. We can Skype if you want. We need to have a conversation. Because have you seen San Jose's roster? Have you seen it? Have you seen their blue line? They have three of the best defensemen in the world. They have the best defenseman in the world in Erik Karlsson. They have Brent Burns, and they have Marc-Edouard Vlasic. Can we get it together? Is San Jose's blue line the absolute best in the NHL? If you want to argue that, we can argue that all day and every day forever. But to say Pittsburgh has a better blue line than, say, a San Jose, you are kidding yourself. You are absolutely kidding yourself if you say that if you look at the Pittsburgh blue line, then no other team in the NHL can compete with that blue line. That is an absolute lie. Just a lie. The second option, which is above average, 42% said it was above average. 40% said it was average, and 12% said below average. Now, my thought process behind what I chose, I didn't make an option for what I thought because it was too in between the lines. I think the blue line for the Penguins is right in between below average and average because of what you said earlier, because there's so many what ifs. There's so many reliances on Chris Letang. There's so many reliances on this happening and that happening and this and that. That in my mind, if even one of those things don't happen or doesn't work as well or whatever, then that blue line is going to get exposed, and it's going to get exposed very quickly. So to not have those many questions up in the air would have put them in the above average category for me personally. But because there are so many if this then that hypotheticals, that had to move the Pittsburgh blue line down in my head a little bit to that somewhere in between below average and average, maybe leading a little more towards average. But if Letang goes down, the whole team goes down, which is a huge problem for the Penguins. I mean, Letang, hopefully he doesn't. Obviously, hopefully he doesn't. But if he does, then that blue line is gonna look very bad real quick.
Yep, as we saw in the playoffs, they couldn't move the puck. They were getting outshot. They were getting out attempted. Basically, everything that could go wrong for them at 5-on-5 was the only reason. Like I said, I think the only reason they won the cup, or I know the only reason they won the cup in 2016-17 is because they took advantage of the mistakes that other teams made. And last year, they probably had a better team last year, and they were probably a lot better last year, and they got shut down quickly. So I think if you replayed the 2016-17 playoffs 10 times, the Penguins get eliminated in the second round 9 of the 10 times.
Well, one of the responses to the poll question comes from Michael Klaus at Michael Klaus 4. He says top 10 in the league for sure. Oh boy. Deep, talented, good mix of physical play and puck movers to excel the transition game, which again heavily relies on Chris Letang being healthy or not, because if he's out, then most of that goes out the window. Good
it
mix
goes on all Schultz shoulders. Schultz has to shoulder the entire offensive load if that happens.
Which, never... If you always have to rely on one player to do that kind of thing, it usually does not end well. Good mix of guys who can produce points, run the power play and penalty kill. Youth and veterans bring a good mix and balance, mostly importantly, and top 4D with 9 cups. That was a whole quote from Michael Klaus. Listen, you can have as many cup experience, you can wear the rings while you play if you want, if you so chose. I don't recommend that. Probably not a good idea to wear expensive rings while you play hockey. But Craig Adams has rings. Doesn't mean that he's a great hockey player. That doesn't mean that he's a top 6 or a top 9 or whatever you want to put him. That doesn't mean that some of these guys are good because they have rings. I've never liked that argument. Sometimes it benefits the team, right? Obviously, if you have a young group, if you have a young core, and you bring in a veteran who has won, who knows how to win, who knows how to conduct himself on the ice, off the ice, that helps. On a day-to-day basis, on a game-to-game basis, your rings aren't going to win another one just because you have other rings. So, So you need good players, for the most part anyway, to win the Stanley Cup. You need to have a solid group of players that can play the game as one. As we saw in Washington last season, did they have the best roster in the league? No, but they played so well collectively as one that they managed to win their first cup. And as we saw in the banner raising last year, and Stanley Cup hangover, what hangover? They just destroyed the Boston Bruins last night. I was watching that at home, and it was, oh man, they scored what was it, like 40 seconds into the game, and then
24 seconds.
It was, and they just never looked back. I mean, it was awe-inspiring just how a lot. I don't want to say a lot of people, but some people were doubtful. Oh, Washington's gonna have a cup hangover. They're not gonna do well. Yada yada yada. And then the puck drops, and then 40 seconds into the game they score, and the game ends 7-0. By the way, I have Braden Holtby on my ESPN fantasy team. Very glad he got a shutout for me. 8 points on the board for my fantasy team. Looking good. Patty Marleau got an assist in the overtime game. That's more points for me on the board. I'm looking quite good after day one. Day two, looking. I have a full team playing tonight. Hopefully going to get some points on the board en route to a week 1 victory. Hopefully. We have CFC_Joe W., who said, above average, Dumoulin is one of the most underrated players in the league. Now, is Dumoulin underrated? Yes. Is the blue line above average? I don't think so. Because of what we just talked about. There's so many hypotheticals, there are so many if X then Y that it doesn't make sense to make that to say that blue line is above average, because there are just so many questions surrounding those 6, 7, 8 players that it just, if one thing, if you get a flat tire, or if just one little thing falls off the wagon, it's going to be catastrophic for the most part. Connor, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that too. It's because there's just too much to question, and the Penguins are known for having injuries too, so they might not even have 2 guys that you start the season with in the lineup on any occasion. Like, you might lose Mata, you could lose Johnson, you could lose Letang, and then you have a whole shuffling list where you're forcing everyone to go into roles that they can't handle, and it'll just cause a domino effect on the entire team.
Well, they do have to protect the net, which is Matt Murray's net. Now, as we all know, Matt Murray was a rookie when they won the Cup the first time in 2016, was a rookie again when they won the Cup in 2017, and as we know, got bounced by the Caps last season in Game 7, which is honestly an all-time series. It was an absolutely incredible. I think it was a Game 6 or Game 7. I can't remember, but it was
Game 6.
Game 6. That's right. Game 6. I mean, that series was so fun to watch. If you're, of course, not a Penguins or a Capitals fan, because if you are, then you were sweating bullets during every second of that game, before the game, after the game, you were sweating bullets. If you weren't a fan of those teams, and you're a fan of the Rangers like myself, who were not in the playoffs to begin with, and you're just watching because you were obsessed with the sport, that series was an absolute joy to watch. Is Matt Murray mentally capable enough to be better than he was last season and return to his rookie season form and perform well and to carry the team again to another cup? Because I asked this about Freddie Anderson last week, and I have more questions about Anderson than I do Matt Murray. But between the pipes, there's some instances with Matt Murray's game where last season I was watching him, and there were just times where he was very good, and then there were other times where he gives up a goal that you see, and you're like, how did that go in? Can Matt Murray clean up that part of his game in time for yet another cup run for the Penguins, or are we going to see more of what we saw last season out of Murray, do you think?
I think he's definitely a lot better than he showed last year. He was dealing with some family matters. Of course, his father died in January, and I think that had an effect on his play throughout the year. And he also wasn't healthy for most of the season. He had a concussion, had a knee injury, had another leg injury, I believe. So he was coming back from a lot, and he was also inconsistent during his time. And I think the two really short off seasons the last 2 years started to take an effect on him. And I know he was only 23 last year, but still, that was a lot of hockey for the Penguins as a team. And Matt Murray is a mental warrior. That's all he gets. That's most of the time he's getting praised for that. But he's definitely a lot better than the 908 he had last year. But I don't think he's as good as the 923, the 930 he posted his first couple of years in the league. I think he's somewhere between a 920 and a 915 goalie, which is perfectly fine for a Penguins team that's going to score a ton of goals.
Well, according to HockeyReference.com, his goals saved above average, which, if you don't know, is the goals the goalie prevented, given his save percentage and shots faced, versus the league average save percentage on the same number of shots. Of course, minimum 4 shots faced per game. Thank you to Hockey Reference, by the way, for these awesome statistics. So in 2016-2017, that season, Matt Murray saved an average of 14.5 goals more than the average goalie, which is a crazy great number. That's a great number. In 2017-2018, as a result of what you just talked about and a whole lot of other variables, he gave up 8 more goals than the average goaltender last season. So is Matt Murray going to return to that 14 range, or do you think he's probably going to be around that, 5, 6, 7 goal saved above average? Or what's your ideal number here for Matt Murray in terms of goals saved above average?
I think ideally he'll be around, like as you said, the 5 to 6 mark. And I think a lot of it will come from the Penguins getting better luck at 5-on-5, because their luck there last year was awful. They had I think it was a 9-13 5-on-5 save percentage between the 3 main goalies on their roster now, and Jari, DeSmith, and Murray. And the last 2 years it was 9-26 and 9-30, I believe. So bouncing back to a level where they can maybe get a 9-21 as a team, that could help his goals saved above average go up into the range where the Penguins need it to be. And Murray's even strength save percentage last year was 911, which is down from the 932 and the 933 he posted his first 2 years in the league. So it was a lot to do with bad luck.
Yeah, I mean, there's you can totally chalk some of that up to luck. Matt Murray, in my opinion anyway, needs to show some of the glory days, I guess you can say, of the 16-17 season. But one of the players that won't help him at all is Jack Johnson. There was a lot of talk about this in June and around the free agency signing, and I retweeted this again on my personal account just as a reminder. But Ineffective Math, who is Micah McCurdy, who is a analytics expert, basically showed the deep analytics of Jack Johnson and concluded that he is a replacement level defender. And Jesse Marshall at JMarsh FOF also showed some other stats about Jack Johnson, and his Corsi's terrible. His offensive production is just not good. His defensive production just isn't good, and he gets a lot of ice time as well. Well, he did anyway in Columbus and last season. But Jack Johnson, if he's a top 4 defenseman in Pittsburgh, there's a problem. There's a problem with deployment. There's going to be a problem with Matt Murray, because a lot of, obviously a goaltender can win you a game. But at the end of the day, if your defense is bad, the team is not making the playoffs. Case in point, the Rangers last season. Henrik Lundqvist, of course, one of the best goalies of all time. His defense did not show up for the last season for the most part at all. And that was one of the biggest reasons why the Rangers didn't make the playoffs last year, was on top of the Stepan trade and all of that, and trading McDonough at the end of the year and all that, their defense just didn't show up. So will Lundqvist win a few games without that? I mean, yeah, that's what he's done for his entire career. The only reason the Rangers made the final in 2014 was because of Henrik Lundqvist. I mean, I don't know if you watched Dan Girardi in those playoffs, but he was abysmal, and he was playing top 2 minutes, and they still made the final. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm pretty salty about that final because Dwight King, that was goalie interference. That was goalie interference in Game 2, and if Alain Vigneault wouldn't deploy Dan Girardi, then we would be talking about a Rangers Cup win in 2014. That's all I'm saying. I am very salty about that series. Anyway, Daniel Sprong for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Let's go back to the Penguins for a second here. Daniel Sprong is, as we talked about, he is a solid prospect, drafted in the second round, I believe, in 2015. Yeah. What do you see out of Sprong that says that says to you that he is not only ready to make the team, but he is ready to make an impact in the lineup right now tonight?
Well, as I've seen, following his junior career and his year in the AHL, he produced everywhere he was. He had, I think it was 88 points one of his years in the Q, and then he had 61, I believe, his final year there. And then he had 65 in 65 games with Wilkes-Barre last year. So it gave them hope, and he scored 30 goals too. So, I mean, he can put the puck in the net, and that's what the Penguins need from him. But it was disappointing to see when he would come up to the NHL, he wasn't producing at the same rate. He had 3 points in, I believe it was 8 games last year, and all of them came in one game against the Islanders in January, and then he was pointless the rest of the time, and he only has 5 career points in the 26 games. But to be fair, 18 of the games he played as an 18-year-old, playing with a Penguins team that was just god-awful under Mike Johnston before he was fired. And he only got 8 minutes a game his first time up.
Which is not a great way to get an 18-year-old's confidence up.
No, not at all. And it didn't help that Crosby was struggling either. It didn't help that everyone in the lineup, except Malkin, up until January, was basically useless. So Sprong got the short end of the stick. They burned a year off his entry-level contract because they thought he would get better, but he never reached the level they wanted him to be at, even though he was only 18. So they sent him back down. Then he basically had a lost season in 2016-17 because of a shoulder injury, and he didn't play until December. So I think the Penguins were hoping last year he could make the jump, but there was a lot of noise made about maybe he's not ready defensively, even though he's completely fine offensively. But then you look at guys like Tom Kuhnhackl, Carter Rowney, who are getting fourth-line minutes despite the fact that they were possession black holes and combined for 15 points throughout the whole season in 2017-18.
Daniel Sprong, by the way, is 5 days older than I am. This man is playing on the Pittsburgh Penguins. I am here talking about the man who's playing on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Speaking of things that make me feel super old and not in shape at all, Jesperi Kotkaniemi is the first player who was born in the new millennium to have played in a Major 4 sport. He is the only player born in 2000, the first player born in 2000 to make a professional team. To be fair, though,
will be the second tonight for the Sabres, but yeah.
To be fair, the NFL, you can't do that in the NFL because you have to go through college. In the NBA, you have to go through college. And in the MLB, I mean, you could try, but you probably won't make the team. So to be fair, the NHL is the only league that would potentially even allow that. But at the end of the day, this man is 18 years old. He was dangling the Maple Leafs last night. This kid, his helmet is too big for him. And I'm sitting on the couch watching him play. I feel old. Where's my AARP card? I mean, I need these 50 and older coupons. I mean, where are my discounts? I am old. I can't do this anymore. But this kid's 18. 18. I don't know about you, Connor, but I feel super old. And I'm only 21. You know, I'm graduating college in about 2 months. This kid's 18 and dangling around the Mitch Marner and the Toronto Maple Leafs. I mean, that's that's incredible. Honestly.
Oh yeah, I feel old too. I felt old that second that a guy born after January 24th of '98 was drafted. I felt old when I saw Alex Nylander getting picked by the Sabres.
I watched his dad play. Michael Nylander was a Ranger. I remember watching him play. This is crazy. Can we stop? This is wild. This is wild, man. We're too old. I'm 21, you're 20. We are too old for the league. I mean, we're free agents, right? So
Yeah.
theoretically, hey, listen.
That's why I enjoy being a Penguins fan, though. All the players, with the exception of a few, are well over 20, so I can feel like I'm a child still.
Hedl is like 19 on the Rangers. Anderson's like 19 on the Rangers. Didn't make the team because he was... And Elias Anderson didn't make the team because he's too good. That was the reasoning, but because the top three lines were filled, and according to David Quinn, new head coach of the Rangers, he was too good to play on the fourth line, so instead they sent him down to play on the first line in Hartford, which makes sense. I mean, I'm not going to argue that. That's a fair point. But tonight's games, let's go through some of these games, because there's a lot of them tonight. And I want your opinion on these games here. Bruins at Buffalo. Bruins, of course. Oh boy, just did not show up to last night's game against Washington. Just didn't even enter the stadium. Didn't enter the arena. didn't enter Washington D.C. I don't know where they were, but they weren't in Washington, as we saw last night. In the 7-0 complete demolition derby, it was like watching someone play NHL 19 on easy mode. I mean, on rookie mode. I mean, like what was going on? No one knows. But some people were quick to point out that the Bruins and the Flames, who of course both went abroad to play exhibition games, both lost and both didn't really look great either. Which is a case that you can make. It's definitely an argument, definitely a discussion that we can have. But at the end of the day, to lose 7-0 like that, oh boy. So we got the Bruins and the Sabres tonight. What do you think about this? What do you think about this matchup? And are the Bruins actually gonna show up in Buffalo, or what's the deal here?
Well, I think their fans would be calling for everyone's head if they get blown out again by the Sabres, or if they get blown out and it's by the Sabres again. But I'm excited to see Dahlin make his NHL debut. I think the Bruins will be motivated from getting their ass handed to them yesterday. I think they'll want to come back. I think they're gonna be mad. They're gonna be hungry. I can see them scoring maybe 4 goals, 5 goals on the Sabres tonight, and I think it'll be a good game to watch. But ultimately, I think the Bruins come out of it with a 4-2 victory.
Well, Buffalo did get better this season, which is something that we haven't been able to say in quite some time. The Sabres actually have a decent team. Are they going to make the playoffs? Probably not. Are they going to actually win some games here? Yeah, probably.
They'll be closer to a playoff spot than they will to last place in the East.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, are they going to be dead last? No, because Ottawa exists. Ottawa's going to get like 8 points this season,
and the Islanders exist.
That's true. The Islanders well, the Islanders are more competitive than the Senators are. They still have Matt Barzal. They have Anders Lee, who is the new captain of the Islanders. They have some decent... They have Anthony Beauvillier. They have some players that are capable of winning games. Their goalie situation isn't great. They have Greiss and Robin Lehner. And you can hear... My voice just cracked by saying Lehner. That's pretty much a good summary of what I think about Robin Lehner in the crease anyway. I mean, I said this before. I mean, he's a very just not as average of a goalie as you can imagine on the ice. I mean, he's literally average. So I don't know how many games the goalies are going to win for the Islanders, but in terms of overall points, they're going to have more than 8. Senators are going to have like 8 points. They have Mark Stone, they have Matt Duchene sometimes, and that's about. I mean, they also have Shabbat, but that's about it. They don't have anything else really going for them, and I feel really bad for Sens fans because they have to deal with that now, and especially after the terrible Carlson trade.
Yeah, they had a chance to just stack up their farm system for years, and they completely blew it for God knows what reason.
They had all the leverage in the world. They had the best defenseman in the world. They never should have traded him. I mean, I guess you can make the argument that you trade him and you get an entire top six back, but they didn't do that. They got a couple of fairly solid prospects, and I talked to Eric Curra a couple weeks ago, who watches the Sharks and is an avid fan of the Sharks and is an editor for Teal Town USA. I talked to him about the Carlson trade, and we broke that down. And there were a couple of names on that list where he was sad to see go, but in terms of getting Erik Karlsson back, he was okay with. But that trade could have gone so much better for the Senators if they just weren't the Senators. I mean, I don't know what's going on in Ottawa, but they're gonna get about 8 points this season, not a whole lot more. Islanders are playing the Hurricanes, and the Caps are playing the Penguins, and they're back to back as well. Bruins are playing back to back, so the Capitals. They're playing in Pittsburgh. The Capitals played super well. On top of everything else that transpired, they also were playing in front of a rabid home fan base, especially with the banner raising and all that. But will the Penguins make the Caps go 1-1 here? Because the Caps looked flawless last night. Honestly, they were for the most part. I mean, they were just brilliant every shift. They were out hustling the Bruins. They were beating them to pucks. They were beating them in every facet of the game that I saw, and they looked like the better team. Now, will that carry over to games 2 and 70 and game 41? Probably not. They're obviously going to lose some games here, but is that going to happen in game 2, do you think, or are the Caps going to go 2-0 here? I mean, I would love for them to go 2-0 because, like I said, Holtby on my fantasy team. Gets me those points. The points are very crucial to my team. So if Holtby could win the game, I'd very much appreciate it. But do you think the Caps are gonna pull this one out, or is it a Penguins dub?
Well, Penguins Caps games are always close, of course. I think the Penguins are going to be motivated, knowing that their dreams at a three-peat were dashed by the Capitals last year. It's their home opener. This might be the most stacked team offensively in the Crosby and Malkin era. I think they're going to be playing hard tonight. They're going to be playing just to show the Capitals that, hey, even though you beat us in the playoffs doesn't mean that you're better than us now. And they're going to go hard at them. The Caps are coming off a huge game last night, and they may be tired. Like Broussard said earlier this morning in an interview, they're going to try and take advantage of the fact they played last night and that they were all rambunctious and they were all hyped up about it. So I can see the Penguins taking an early lead, and I think the Caps can fight back. And I would love to see this game go to OT. I never want these kinds of games to end, but I think it'll be much like the opening night in 2016-17. I think it'll end 3-2, and hopefully it doesn't go to a shootout, and I'm hoping it goes to overtime. But I can see the Penguins winning 3-2 in overtime.
I would love for continuous overtime because you see that in basketball. You see that in baseball. Can we get it in hockey and football?
Maybe after the next lockout we can get it.
By extension, football as well. I hate ties. Ties are terrible for sports. Ties need to just... there's obviously no ties in hockey, but there's shootouts, which is...
Shootouts ruin great games.
Shootouts are better than ties, but they're also not better than continuous overtime. Just have like a 5-minute 3-on-3, just continuous, and then just until someone wins. I get the reasoning behind not doing that because again it's fatigue, it's and that, but 3-on-3 overtime isn't as fast paced as it was in the first season when they first implemented it because no one knew how to run 3-on-3 off. Like no one knew how to play 3-on-3. No one knew. So it was just back and forth, and it was chaos. Now that teams know how to run 3-on-3 and they practice that and this and that, it's a much slower game in overtime than it was. So Personally, I would love to see a continuous 3-on-3. Would that happen? Probably not, because shootouts are a quick way to end the game unless it goes 100 rounds, which some shootouts have gone. But for the most part, I mean, I would love to see continuous 3-on-3. Would that happen? Probably not. But at least like in football, can we get rid of ties? Football, you play a football game once a week, right? So why then would you end in a tie? I don't.
It's more physical in football. You're getting hit every single play.
Right. This is a conversation for another day. But I hate ties. So to me, it's like, just can we play until someone wins? Anyone. Just if it's the refs, if it's the person in the fourth row, someone just needs to win the game. I don't care who it is. At that point, if the security guard wins the game, if the person in the bleachers wins the game, I don't care. I just want someone to win the game. And ties to me they're just bad for the sport. But I mean, it's Caps Penguins. Like, this game it's gonna start in a couple minutes here. It's going to be incredible. Sabres Bruins is just about to start here as well. You got the Islanders and the Hurricanes as well tonight. Rangers and Predators. Rangers, hopefully, fingers crossed, are going to win their first game of the season. Predators are obviously a good team, but I don't trust Pekka Rinne. He's also on the road. Pekka Rinne on the road is a not great combo. Pekka Rinne.
I've always had mixed feelings about him. I think Saros is better than Rinne, but Preds fans will come to your throat if you say that.
I mean, is Saros incredible? No, but Pekka Rinne, I mean, even if you just want to focus on the playoffs, Pekka Rinne goes from being incredible to being incapable of stopping anything, literally anything. We saw that in the playoff series against the Jets. We saw it against the Penguins. We've seen this time and time again. Pekka Rinne, when it comes down to it, cannot make the saves. He just can't do it. So he can.
He was twice in Pittsburgh during the Penguins only played 3 games at home during the Stanley Cup final. And he was pulled in 2 of those games.
Yeah. At the end of the day, Pekka Rinne could win all. He could win all 82 regular season games for all I care. He could start, and they could win all 82 regular season games. They could do that. But it's a completely different dragon, different monster, different battle in the playoffs. And Pekka Rinne has showed that he doesn't show up in the playoffs when it matters. So Pekka Rinne, as far as I'm concerned, is a regular season goalie. In the playoffs, he has flashes where he does very well, but there are a lot of nights where he, as you said, he got pulled in 2 to 3 nights in Pittsburgh. He got pulled against the Winnipeg series a bunch of times. I mean, Pekka Rinne, when it comes down to it, is not the goalie that's going to win Nashville the Cup.
He only has 2 playoff performances over a .915. And they came in 2011-12 and 2016-17, but his save percentage took a huge dive during the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah. This could be an excellent conversation for a different day, but if the Nashville Predators had a different goalie in the finals against the Penguins,
they would have won the Cup.
There could be a great argument had that the Nashville Predators would have won their first Stanley Cup. But because Rinne just gave up the most asinine goals, the most just basic shots, just shots that should never have gone in, or gives up bad rebounds that go in, and just if it was any, I don't want to say if it was anybody else, but if a goalie that was capable of stopping those kinds of shots was in net for Nashville, they probably most likely would have won the Cup that year. Because it went 6. If I'm not mistaken, it went 6.
Yeah.
And it was very competitive for most of the game until, of course, the inevitable bad goal, and then it all went downhill from there. Except in Game 6 where it was, but again, the Preds had a couple of goals that weren't called that should have been called goals, and that's a
It's blown whistle.
That's a whole different conversation for a whole different day. You got the Hawks and the Senators again. That's gonna end in a 10-9 score. The Hawks have Cam Ward in net, and the Senators don't have a team, so that's gonna end in a bloodbath probably. You got Blue Jackets and Red Wings tonight. You got Jets and Blues. That'll be a fun game. The Blues, of course, have Ryan O'Reilly and went from selling. They sold Stastny and then almost made the playoffs after that for I don't even know how that's possible. And then traded for Ryan O'Reilly, and they're looking good now. And then you have Coyotes and Stars, which is going to be another great game. The Coyotes actually this year again. Stop me if you've heard this before, but they're not going to be bad this year. The Coyotes aren't going to be terrible this year. Are they going to make the playoffs? Probably not. Are they going to be better? They're probably going to get 85 points or so. They're going to be in the mix for a spot. Are they going to make it? No. Are they going to be better than they were? Yeah. I mean, yeah. Wild and Avalanche should be a good game. Flyers and Golden Knights. That'll be an interesting game as well.
That's a good start.
What'd you say? Sorry.
Oh, that's a good start for both their seasons. It's a good test for the Golden Knights coming off of a Stanley Cup run. Gives them a perfect way to make a claim that it wasn't a fluke. If they can start off the season on the right foot, then they'll show everyone that it wasn't, oh, hey, we're running off the high of being doubted and that we're here to stay.
Yeah. Also, the Flyers now have JVR. The Golden Knights have Pacioretty now. I mean, that's going to be a great game.
And Spaz.
Before we end the show, let's get predictions in for Friday's games because, as you know, we are recording Thursday night just as some of these games are going on. The Sabres and Bruins are scoreless, 3.5 minutes into the game. And this is going to go up later tonight. So most of these games are probably either going to end or are in the midst. And so Friday only has a couple of games. The Hurricanes are at Columbus, and the Sharks are in LA, which is going to be as we all know, the Sharks and Los Angeles games are always fun to watch. Hurricanes and Blue Jackets, final score.
I'm going to go with 3-1. I think the Hurricanes are going to win, though.
Okay.
I think that their defense has gotten infinitely better with Dougie Hamilton. I think he's one of the most underrated defensemen in the league, and I think this is the year they finally get some solid goaltending.
Likes museums, though. He's a museum guy. I don't know about that. He likes museums.
Doesn't have the party lifestyle. He's not fit for Calgary.
And Sharks LA, final score in that game.
I'm going to go with 2-1. I think Martin Jones is going to be motivated coming off of his dismal performance last night, and the Kings don't exactly inspire me when I look at them offensively. I mean, they have Kopitar, they have Kovalchuk, but he's 35, and the Kings are more of a defensive-minded team than they are offensive too. And the Sharks are going to be motivated coming off of that game, and I think they're going to want to show everyone that they want to win too.
I agree with you for Carolina. I mean, Carolina, I would probably pick to win that game. 3-1. I don't know. Bob is capable of making incredible stops, but also there's been games here and there where he just gives up 5-6 goals occasionally. Obviously, he's a Vezina winner, so he's obviously one of the best goalies in the world. But Carolina, as you said, much better team. I think they pull this one out because they're motivated, because they want to show the NHL that, hey, we're here to stay, and we've gotten a lot better. So I think the Hurricanes are going to win this one. I'm going to say 2-1 just because it's Bob. Bob is going to make some saves they probably shouldn't be making, but Carolina is going to pull this one out 2-1. I think the offense for Columbus just won't be there tomorrow. I mean, obviously we don't know, but for San Jose and LA, I'm going to say 5-3 San Jose. I think Erik Karlsson's going to come out and score a goal, maybe in an apple or two, get a nice 2 or 3 point night in. Jonathan Quick is overrated. He's good. He's overrated. If you shoot below the waist, you're never going to score. If you shoot above the waist, there's a high chance you'll score. So, and Erik Karlsson is very good at picking corners, as everyone in the NHL knows. So I think Erik Karlsson's going to have a night in LA. Sharks are going to win that 1-5-3. I mean, probably Kopitar's going to have a goal. Maybe Kovalchuk has a snipe. I mean, Martin Jones let up a couple of bad goals last night in the game against Anaheim. Just a couple of goals that he just shouldn't be giving up. Any goal he shouldn't be giving up.
Oh, Pittsburgh just scored too.
Oh.
Jamie Alexiak.
Jamie Alexiak. Penguins legend. The sniper of the century, Jamie Alexiak. Just put the Penguins up on the Caps 1-0. But yeah, the Sharks are gonna beat the Kings, I think, 5-3 or something along that range. But man, Martin Jones needs to relax and not give up a couple of those terrible goals that he gave up in Anaheim last night. But Connor, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time out. And I'll talk to you again real soon.
Talk to you soon.
And as always, I'm Andrew Chelney. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you once again next week.